together and help me welcome Nathan Holiner.
Hello, bonjour, buenos dias, guten tag, privyet, ni hama, konnichiwa, sanu, ciao, and shalom. As David just said, I love foreign languages, and I love to go on Google Translate, and I'm able to learn to say hello in 10 different languages, as you just heard. And so now, it's time I present you my story. A rope. Have you ever imagined how important a piece of rope could be? Well, you're about to find out. I call this story Thanks to a Single Piece of Rope. It was August 1620. A 28-year-old man named John Howland, along with a large group of other people, boarded 2 small sailing ships bound for the New World, far across the Atlantic Ocean. One of those ships was a sailing ship named the Speedwell. The other ship was a merchant ship that had spent its whole life carrying cargo across the English Channel, so it had never been over the Atlantic Ocean before, and neither had its captain. But the captain was ready to retire anyway, and had decided to make it the grand finale voyage for himself and his ship. His ship was the Mayflower. Now, the best time to sail across the Atlantic Ocean is in the spring, sometime between February and June. But it took so long for the people to repair the 2 ships that they got off at a very late start. But at last, they were all ready to go, and off they sailed. And wouldn't you know it, on the very first day out on the ocean, the Speedwell suddenly leaked. So they had to turn around, go back and repair the Speedwell some more. And again they set sail. This time the Speedwell lasted for almost a week. And you're not going to believe this, but the Speedwell leaked again. And so again they had to turn around and go back. But this time the captain said, "Never mind, we're all going on the Mayflower. There's no more time for repairs." The passengers all said, "Oh, no." And the captain said, "Oh, yes." And so all 102 passengers climbed into the cargo hold of the Mayflower while the Speedwell was sold for scrap. So apparently, the Speedwell did not speed well at all. Now, the Mayflower was only 90 feet long, but its cargo hold was only 50 feet long, and the space from the floor to the ceiling was only 5 feet high. The passengers were all scrunched together. "Ooh, get your elbow off me." "Ooh, that's my foot. Oh, yeah. It's all stuffy in here." "Oh." And can you imagine sleeping standing up? Well, that's what the people on board the Mayflower did. They had to stand up throughout the entire voyage, and they had to take turns sitting or lying down whenever they could. At last, the Mayflower set off on September 6th. But do you know what kind of weather we get in the Atlantic Ocean in the fall? That's right, hurricanes. And so the Mayflower spent the entire voyage going through heavy rainstorms, harsh winds, lightning and thunder, and waves that were 30 to 40 feet high. Woo, that's taller than my house. It was not an easy voyage at all. The Mayflower was tossed and turned on the rolling waves like a toy sailboat. And the people down below, they were miserable. They kept sliding back and forth and back and forth and going up and down and up and down. And they got horribly sick. It was worse than any amusement park or carnival ride you've ever been on in your life. And not only that, but the only air they had to breathe was what came in through the open hatch that led into the cargo hold, which had been covered up with a thick tarp so that the water wouldn't pour in. And so the ventilation down in the cargo hold was very bad too. Finally, John Howland couldn't take it anymore. He said out loud, "I'm going up on deck to get some fresh air." And that is just what he did. But then, all of a sudden, a huge wave swept over the Mayflower and knocked poor John into the ocean. And there he was, floundering helplessly on the rolling waves, trying his best not to drown. He was tossed and turned, and the waves kept pushing him below the surface. And each time he came up to breathe, he only got half a breath of air. And so it looked like it was the end for John Howland. But then a miracle happened. Another wave swept over the Mayflower and broke off a long piece of rope, and it landed right next to where John was. He grabbed onto that rope and held on with all his might. But still, the waves kept pushing him below the surface, and he was whipped through the air like the tail of a kite. Now, you all might have thought that the crew members would not have been able to save him that day. You all would have thought they would have said, "Oh no, he's a goner!" But no, that's not what happened. The sailors rushed over to the side of the ship where the rope was, and when they saw John bobbing up and down and floundering on the rolling waves, they grabbed onto that rope and pulled with all their might. Heave, ho, heave, ho, until finally John was back on board the Mayflower, safe and sound. The Mayflower finally arrived in the New World on November 11th, but thanks to all the bad weather, it had taken the little vessel 66 days to sail across the Atlantic Ocean instead of 31 like they would have if they had left in the spring. Sadly, half the people that made the voyage perished during the first winter in the New World. And when spring came, several more passed away as well. But John was one of the lucky ones. He helped the other pilgrims clear land, plant crops, build houses, and make friends with all the native people. In the end, John Howland lived a good, long, happy, and successful life. He got married and had 10 children and 88 grandchildren. And as a matter of fact, there are over 2 million of his descendants living in the United States today. Now just think, if John Howland had drowned at sea that day, if he had not been rescued that day, 3 U.S. presidents would never have been born. Franklin D. Roosevelt, George H.W. Bush, and his son, George W. Bush. The actors, Chevy Chase, Alec Baldwin, Humphrey Bogart, and John Lithgow would never have been born either. Or the writers, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and Ralph Waldo Emerson. All thanks to a single piece of rope. Thank you. Gracias. Merci. Danke. Arigato.